Howe is an author, master teacher, and world-renowned expert on A Course in Miracles, a self-study course for finding peace of mind and healing through relationships. Carol is widely known for her extraordinary ability to guide anyone to peace of mind with simple, humorous, and practical solutions. Over the years, she has successfully helped thousands around the globe to apply the transformational principles of A Course in Miracles to their lives. And over the past 40 plus years, Carol has been prolific in her teaching, her writing, her business consulting, video creation, and everything imaginable based on these powerful principles. So Carol, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Soul Collective podcast.
Oh, I just am delighted to be here. There's nothing more fun than talking about this material.
It's so good. And, you know, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I am not an expert in the Course in Miracles. So I am so excited to learn right along with our listeners. And, you know, we couldn't be recording this at a more important time. You know, we're seeing emotional turmoil, we're seeing fear, doubt, prejudice all around us. And there's so many pertinent teachings from A Course in Miracles that can be really applied to this time. So what are some of the things that you would like us to know about some of these emotions that are surfacing during this time?
One of the things I have always said, I've written about this for years and years, if I could stand on the housetops and shout one thing, it would be allow yourself to deeply and fully feel how you feel. Virtually across the board, doesn't matter what country I'm in, what age group I'm in, somehow we have made up the story and it's been passed down to us that there's something the matter with us if we have an emotional response to something. In fact, I wrote a book one time called Healing the Hurt Behind Addictions and Compulsive Behaviors, and I interviewed a lot of people and I said, because after all, addictions are to hide rather than to support and allow your emotions. And so I said, what was the problem? And to a person, everybody said, among possibly other things, it means you're weak. Like, this notion is absolutely absurd. It doesn't mean any such thing. In other words, this is part of how we express as human beings, but because our emotional nature has gotten such bad press, then we decide we need to hide it, we need to resist it, we need to push against it, we need to pretend it's not there. And let me tell you why that is so unworkable. First of all, we think that our emotions are caused by something outside ourselves. They are not caused by, but they are triggered by something outside ourselves, something that turns on our own stress response. All righty, once I've got my stress response turned on, it comes to my rescue. In other words, I've indicated, my brain has indicated there's a threat. It goes, okay, I'm on it. And it replaces your normal body chemistry with corticosteroids, all kinds of heavy duty chemicals that are only intended to be in the body a short time. After all, if this is an emergency, it's supposed to be over with soon. So listen carefully. It's those chemicals in our own bodies taken up through receptor sites into all the cells of the body that creates our emotional state. Okay, well, guess what? If I now resist and fight against the emotions that I myself have created inside my own body, I'm telling my brain, oh, here's another enemy. And it's going to keep producing the same chemicals, creating an emotional state. I'm going to fight against it. It will create more, and I will be in a closed loop that I may never get out of my whole life if I don't completely change my attitude toward my own emotions. They're there as messengers. They're trying to tell us something, and they are not the enemy. See, one of the problems, in addition to just completely fouling up my body chemistry, it turns off the frontal lobe of the brain, about the 40% that's directly behind your forehead, Well, the frontal lobe of the brain, because after all, if you're trying to escape from an emergency and save your life, which is what the stress response being turned on is about, there are a lot of things that don't need to be happening. Like you don't need to be digesting food, so it kind of turns off the digestive system. Notice how many drugs are out there to try to fix up your digestive system. Well, if we would stop messing it up, we wouldn't need those. But in any event, the frontal lobe is where we are adults. That's where empathy comes from.
Mm.
Delayed gratification, impulse control, all of those go offline because I don't need to be doing anything very sophisticated if I feel like I'm in mortal danger and need to stay alive. And your brain doesn't know the difference between like an animal's chasing you in the woods going to eat you for lunch, or your ego is threatened because you have to stand up in front of 1,000 people and make a speech, and you're terrified that you will be humiliated beyond recognition. Or if we've decided our emotions themselves are the enemy and we push against that. So it's like the brain has a singular response to any of those kinds of threats, emotional, physical, etc. Does that make sense?
It does, absolutely. And let's go into that a little bit more because I feel like, oftentimes we have, or the ego has this sneaky way of saying, okay, I'm noticing an emotion that feels painful or negative, and so I'm going to just suppress it or run from it or go to fill
Yes.
in.
Or to your favorite addictions and distractions. Nothing could be worse for your mental, emotional health. So the first thing that I would tell everybody is begin to cultivate the attitude of opening up to rather than pushing away. You want to invite in, you want these emotions that are messengers, and we'll deal later with what the message is, but to allow it in rather than pushing away. Because if you have that receptive attitude, you're telling your brain, hey, you can turn off those chemicals because we don't have a problem here. So
Mm,
being receptive, and as you dive more deeply into, you might say, the invisible of what's happening, the reason why you want to embrace these as if these are precious and bring them towards you is the transformational presence of love is within you. So you're bringing these emotions to where they will actually be resolved, not hidden, not pushed away, not treated as stepchildren. This is where the healing will occur when you bring them towards you, because it never has occurred to us that the healing presence that's going to allow shifts and changes to occur reside as the heart of our very being. We're so
yes.
lacking in this very basic architecture, so to speak, of how life works.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's in going in the pain, which we haven't really been taught as a society or culture to do, right? Like
Absolutely.
vulnerability is, viewed as sort of a weakness. And there is sort of this shame or guilt that comes with
Well,
negative
yeah, if
emotions.
you think you're weak and you can't handle it and you're a second-class citizen because of this, of course you're going to hide it. Of course you're going to have all kinds of defenses against it. And the defenses, guaranteed 1,000,000% only make them worse. And so people can live out their entire lives fighting against their own messenger, so to speak, deeply compromising not only your physical health, but your mental health, your financial health, your relationship health. Everything is going to suffer when you will not own this expression of your very own beloved self.
Yes. And I love how you teach specifically that if we have this type of signal, that there's nothing wrong with us, because then we can really adopt this neutral observer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
healing will occur. In other words, it's like how we think healing, and this is going to get resolved if I keep pushing it away, of course, is a great mystery, but we rarely ask, how is this going to work out if I continually resist how I'm feeling? We just have learned that from our pre-verbal days, and it never has occurred to us to say, is there a better way to do this? And that's the question we want to ask, because the answer, of course, is yes.
Yes. And you have worked with all different kinds of people, from business executives to
Absolutely.
all walks of life, right? And one of the commonalities that you've witnessed is sort of the self-loathing and the disconnection, the inadequacy that people feel that can be healed when we go into
Yeah.
emotions and learn some of these important lessons, right?
Yes, it's like the sense of inadequacy. There, for all of the billions of people on the planet, there are surprisingly few ways, when people are honest, that they describe what they think is true about them. See, the problem is we don't think these are beliefs that we've put on, like we put on our clothes. We think this is inherent within us. And so what I will hear over and over and over again is, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not okay, I don't measure up, I don't have a right to ask for what I want. And these are not registered as optional beliefs, which is what they are. They are registered as a fundamental, deep core truth of my being. And the only thing I can do in life is defend against having to deal with this, or to try to compensate for it, or I finally just succumb and then I run again to my addictions and distractions. And nothing about that is true. Nothing about that. But your viewers need to know, well, if everybody has this same problem going on, where does it come from? In other words, that should be the $64 gazillion question to ask. Here's where it comes from. So we're not going to get into the metaphysics right now that everybody comes into the family environment of, by their own doing. That's a little too metaphysical for right now. It's like, okay, here we are. We get ourselves born. Now, what one must realize is that the sense of personal self, like, I am a woman, I live in Orlando, Florida, I do this and that and the other, I've got 2 children, blah, blah, blah. In other words, we act like I'm a person and I'm having experience. Well, guess what? You can't be thinking, because the self-concept that we build requires the thinking mind. After all, concepts are thoughts. Now, until we're about 3 years old, we don't have a functional thinking mind. Take that in. The 2 major hemispheres of the brain, the left and right hemisphere, when I'm an infant and a toddler, again, up to about the age 3, I only have my right brain functioning, because you know what? That's the nonverbal part. That's the intuitive, instinctive, and like all young animals, young children have a primal goal, which is survival. So at this stage, there's no thinking going on. There's moving around in the environment and noticing what's painful, what's scary, what isn't, what's safe, what isn't safe. And once we get to, but be real clear, before I'm 3, I'm not aware of myself of a person having an experience. I am the experience.
Mm.
Now, once the left brain comes online, I am able to start to think. I'm able to learn a word, chair, for instance, and I'm able to now associate an internal word, chair, with this thing over here. In other words, so little by little, I start to build a story of myself. And the roots of this story, you can call it the roots or the blueprint, is this energy field of experience that I've been swimming around in for 3 years, presuming is me, Well, guess where a lot of that energy field comes from? Your parents, which they've inherited. So when your parents think ill of themselves, which all parents do to one degree or the other, and they've got all the stuff going on with them, I'm experiencing that as me. So when I start to build this concept, the roots of the things that I presume about me, like I'm unworthy, I'm undeserving, I can't ask for what I want, is coming from this early, you might say, energetic mix that I know as myself. And it's all incorrect. But you see the roots of it go back to the place where there was no thought going on. How would I know that?
Makes so much sense. What is the truth?
The truth is, we are conscious awareness, eternal, love itself. Nothing can happen to us. We're all powerful. Whatever we say goes, which means when I say I'm unworthy, nobody pays any attention to me, we don't realize we're using the creative power of the universe, and we'll always make ourselves right. We're not playing with some little second-rate power here. It's like we're not some little tiny piece that's broken off or something. We've got the full power of creation. So if I say I'm no good and nobody likes me, you can count on the fact that that will be your internal experience. The fact that it's not true and that possibly all kinds of people around you love you and care for you, you'll have no awareness of that. You will be experiencing what you've said is true. And you might say, but that person really did punch me in the nose. It's like, they did it, not me. It's like, they were a player in your drama, but you're the
Mm.
producer director. You're the one, through your assertion that you were mistreated, will arrange to be mistreated.
I
There,
think
there are
this,
no victims and villains here. They're just a bunch of amazingly powerful presences kind of not knowing what's going on.
yeah, and I think this is such a powerful concept once we can wrap our minds around it, right? Because we realize that every experience, every person that comes into our conscious awareness is a mirror, or something that someone who can reflect back a
Yeah.
belief or a lesson that we're working on. And once we get a hang of that, then we can see all of these experiences as gifts, really showing us the way. But a lot of times it's not.
You are so correct. Go to the head of the class. That is the entire point. Our relationships are going to reveal to us what it is we believe about ourselves. And boy, have we done a great job of pulling together the cast of characters we have.
Right.
I'm the producer director. I brought the props, I brought the scripts, I brought the scenes, I brought everything I needed to set this drama up for what I have chosen to learn and deal with in this lifetime.
So I'm starting to see that, I'm a powerful creator and I want to change my thoughts and my belief system. And so I start to really tell myself how worthy I am. I start to really practice self-love and try to cultivate that compassion, but I still am seeing, mirrors or experiences that I'm just frustrated with. What do you recommend in that?
Well, what I recommend, and such wonderful thing that you've just brought up, because to say, you know what, I'm worthy, and kind of come at it from the affirmation point of view never works, because that's just kind of, I'm just frosting over the real issue. The real issue, I'm carrying guilt and grief at a level that most people will never ever directly access. I've directly accessed that, and it's not fun. And it
Mm.
was, I had no idea what was happening at the time. But the point is that we carry with us a fundamental idea that we have ruined ourselves, that somehow through, and this is not a conscious thought, we don't walk around every day going, listen, I ruined myself when I was little and I'm flawed forever. Like, We don't do that. There is an internal feeling sense that accompanies that whatever it is we have ruined, and that we are destroyers. And as a result of that, we carry all kinds of guilt around with us. And for the most part, some people are aware of feeling guilty about things, but not the big substantial core of the guilt that you might say is sitting at the bottom of your unconscious mind. And everything is moved toward, don't let this come into awareness. We don't realize that we are on a mission not to let this come into awareness. But this guilt that we've ruined ourselves is the root of all of this. I'm unworthy, I'm undeserving, I don't deserve this, and I can't have that, and so on. In other words, guilt is the reason, and you can't just gloss over the guilt with lovely affirmations, because that doesn't make it go away. The only way it goes away is for us to become aware of just what it is we're blaming ourselves for. And that is done through relationships. In other
Mm.
words, let's say you've got somebody over here that you don't like. And so if you were having a counseling session with me, I'd say, who is it that drives you crazy? Who's the first person who comes to mind that you don't like? And you would tell me somebody. I'm not going to ask you to do that on camera, but but so my person X is going to say, I can't stand somebody. It could be a business person, it could be a neighbor, it could be a family member, it doesn't matter what. And I would say, what is it about them that you can't stand? Well, they are so mean or careless or hateful or dishonest or selfish or whatever, whatever. And then what we would begin to look at is, and they would say, and they make me so upset.
Mm.
And so this is where I would tell them what we talked about earlier is nobody else makes you upset. It's a response in your own mind that's making you upset and turning on your stress response. But then here's where we're going to glean such valuable material from this, which is if somebody says, this person is so mean. And so we would say, can you ever find a time in your life when you've ever been mean? And 100% of the people who are really seriously looking at this will go, yeah.
Mm.
And then we ask the beginning of the deep healing part. And that is, and so you can do this too. You don't have to, we're not going to talk about what it is, but it's like, okay, think of a specific time when you yourself recognized, yeah, my response was mean. And then to ask yourself, at that moment, under those circumstances, with whatever sense of threat was obviously triggered in you, could you have made any other response than the one you made? And 100% of the people who are honest and reflect on just what that situation was and what was going on say no. In other words, even if you're an axe murderer at that moment, with the pain and the fear and the distress and the programming and everything that's going on, that's the highest and best you could do. In other words, whatever our response is when we're in this distressed, provoked state, so to speak, is always the best we can do. It's not like we had an option, like a menu. It's like, I could be kind, I could be understanding, I could let this go. Well, no, you couldn't, because if you could have, you would have. In other words,
Right.
everybody is going to do the best they can, but here lies the problem. So now, let's say my person who recognized, yes, I've been mean, that person has been carrying guilt over being mean. It's not been seen as a mistake, it's been seen as a crime. And to make things worse, we all believe that all of the things that have happened in our lives, the our words or our deeds, good or ill of any kind, are all still existing someplace. And that somehow, especially the things that I did wrong, are kind of like, as I'm fond of saying, kind of following along behind this ever growing pile of transgressions that I can never outrun and ever escape. And that my guilt gets bigger and bigger and bigger because I keep doing more and more things that aren't loving and kind and so on and so forth. Well, you're going to never be free of this until some of these presumptions are looked at and discarded. First of all, here's some really big news. Nothing that you've ever done or said is stored anywhere. It's not like there's like you can go to your public library and if you pull off a volume of War and Peace, it's always going to have War and Peace. It's going to have the same thing in it. There's no library anywhere. There's no big collection of all the things you've done wrong. The very instant a word or a deed or a thought is finished, puff, it disappears. You can think about it, which is not a good idea, but you cannot re-experience it because it does not exist. And you go, oh, well, this is crazier yet, because now I'm carrying around guilt, presuming that, first of all, I have done permanent damage to myself or somebody else, and the proof keeps following me around. And it's like, nothing about this picture is correct. The only thing we ever experience is this moment right now. Right now, you and I are having a conversation, and nothing else that has ever happened in our lives exists. It's now you and me. Nothing about the future exists yet. And it's brand new, it's clean, it is presented to us as uncontaminated. However, there's a catch here. We have this beautiful new clean slate that's presented to us, but we keep refreshing this idea that I deserve to be punished and I'm guilty for being a mean person. In other words, it's not what happened, it's not anybody else, it's this presumption that somehow I'm guilty, I've ruined myself, and we act like I'm ruined forever because the event or the word lasts forever.
Mm.
And
So,
so,
Carol,
yeah,
how important is forgiveness, and how do we go about that journey?
I never used the word forgiveness because everybody learned in Sunday school or somewhere that forgiveness means pardoning, that it really means the person over here who was mean is causing my problem. And how can I possibly really honestly forgive and forget? I can't. I can try to pardon them, but it's inauthentic and it doesn't do anything because the problem is my guilt. Real forgiveness is my own internal release of my own guilt. And
Mm.
I can begin to release it on the grounds that what I'm beating myself up for today, on whatever this is, the 13th of October, is for something that no longer exists. So I want to downgrade all my mistakes, all the things that I've done that aren't loving, from a mistake or from a crime to a mistake, because I haven't actually done any permanent damage to myself or anybody else. But one of the first things before I can take a kind of final step of release, which is what forgiveness is, it's releasing the guilt, it's releasing the pain, it's releasing all the stuff that I'm hanging on to. When you begin to really wrap your head around the idea that, oh, yes, I've just presumed I'm guilty. I've just presumed that kind of my life collectively makes me forever guilty on general principles at this point. And it's like, no. But once you realize that, a lot of these emotions that we don't want to experience are going to come up. And you go, I can't believe, and it will be, sometimes you may cry and cry and cry. I can't believe I've been on myself.
Mm.
And at this point, we begin to develop compassion for ourselves. It's like, I've been beating myself up for doing something when it was the only thing I had as an option at that moment. And the same for this person. This person over here who was, quote, being mean, at that moment, that was all they could do. And so here, when we begin to see a more accurate picture of what's going on, we could weep with compassion for what in the world we have been doing, blaming ourselves,
Mm.
keeping all of this pain going when we will call it the universe or God or love or whatever you're looking at isn't doing any of this. There's no blame coming from some higher authority or higher power or anything else. This is strictly an internal process that's going.
Okay. Yeah, so I love that. So question related to that, sometimes, one of the most common things that people Google these days is how to relieve stress and anxiety. We're living in such a fast paced society, and, feelings of worry and anxiety tend to be very commonplace, right? But people might say, well, I have a very stressful job, it's very demanding, these are all external factors that I really can't do much to control. What would you say
I
in
would
that
say that's completely not accurate. In other words, the job, just like the person, because it's going to be some relationship issue in the job, they're triggers. They're triggers that are triggering my belief in my inadequacy, my belief in my worthlessness, my belief that I don't have a right. That's what's causing my real pain and my anxiety and my fear and my distress is my own self-attack.
Can you give
So,
an example of how that might manifest or play out in a work environment?
well, yes. In other words, let's say, because, oh, it's not some sort of just generic work environment. It's going to be something or somebody. It's
Mhm.
like
My
your,
boss.
your boss uh, seems to talk down to you in some way. And so if I were talking with somebody and going through way more time than we can spend here, and I would get that person to indicate that he acts like I'm not good enough. And like, well, let's see how that's revealing to you that you don't think you're good enough. This happens to be a conversation I had with a client yesterday afternoon about this very, very issue. And when it comes to pass, you go, yeah, I always think I don't measure up. And I thought it was the job. She's actually going back to work for the same large company. And that's why she called. It's like, I can't believe I'm doing this again. It's like, this is not the company. It's not even the boss. It's you. And she was able to track right along with me. It's like, you're bringing an attitude and a belief that I'm not good enough and I don't measure up, and because of our power, we will keep making these self-fulfilling prophecies. Because let me tell you something that's absolutely critical. We have all believed that it's the people out there, situations out there, and so on, that's causing my pain and my stress. Everybody's learned that. And therefore, what I have to learn, and we learn this very early on, I have to learn to defend myself. I have to have my emotional defenses and my physical defenses and my, all kinds of defenses what, and I've got to have, and those defenses are built into the body. That's why the body is such a mess, because we interfere with its proper functioning, the holding patterns that
Yeah.
are held in the body. Now, guess what? When I approach somebody in a offended way, let's say I approached you. And I approached you with, I think you might be secretly trying to hurt me in some way. And so if I approached with that kind of tentative, I'm not even sure how you do that anymore. But anyway, if I approached you with my energy field of, I don't know if I can trust you or not, I don't know what you might do, you're going to read that in my energy field. and you're going to feel the attack of making you guilty before you've ever said a word. In other words, if I have to defend myself against you, what I'm saying to you is, I presume ahead of time that you're guilty. I don't know what you're going to do or how you're going to do it. And I'm going to call out the worst in you. Because this is an assault on you. If I approach you with, like, I have to defend myself from you because obviously there's something that's not nice about you and you're going to try to hurt me.
Mm-mm.
Well, so now I'm attacking you and myself, and everybody loses, and it's awful. Well, notice what happens. So, in that way, I'm determining how you treat me, not you. I'm setting the stage, not you. And we don't realize that. So, now let's take the opposite approach. If I approach anybody, you, the grocery store, the clerk, my kids, my strangers on the street, it doesn't matter, with my own energy of feeling loving and accepting and safe and all's right with the world. And I approach you with, I don't have the slightest need to defend myself at all from you because you're not guilty. You have no possible way of hurting me. So I can be totally open, totally unzipped, totally candid, totally whatever you want to talk about or see or anything else, fine with me. Now, notice what that does for you. If I
Mm.
approach you like this, you're much less inclined to be mean and ugly and hateful and crawl behind your own wall. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely true. Yeah. And I think it's so important to realize, to your point, that we are energetic beings and we're picking up on other people's energy long before people.
Yes, ma'am. In fact, the communications experts, which I'm not necessarily in terms of this statistical business, is that when we communicate with one another, our eyes say so much to one another. There's such deep contact with eyes. And this energy field, do you realize that only about 7% of what we convey in our interactions with people is verbal? It's like, what? Only 7%? Then you've got another sort of double digit thing of facial expression, tone of voice, body language, and then the whole rest, the other 70% is pure energy field. And guess what, folks? You can't hide that.
Mm.
You can't make that go away. You can't negotiate around that. Your energy field is your energy field. And if you feel guilty, defended, fearful, hateful, and the other people are the problem, you're setting yourself up for a relationship exchange that's not going to work out well because you're basically saying, you're the problem, you're guilty. Now, since everybody already feels guilty, you're now making them feel worse rather than better. And that is not going to work out in a relationship. But notice the minute I start to let go of my own guilt and I start to be kind to myself and I realize every moment is a brand new moment. And my goal now with being with you is to be present with you, a clear mind, no need to defend. Well, that's going to bring out the best in people, not the worst. So, in ways that are far more powerful than we realize, we are the ones who decide how people treat us, not the other people. And when you do this, I can't, I have to have heard from at least, I've lost count, let's say 1,000 people. That's probably too small, who've said, I changed my mind about me and I let go, and you'll never guess what happened. It's like the father, the husband, the next door neighbor, the whatever, they all either stopped. One of three things will always happen when you let go of your own guilt. Either that person, because it's always usually 99.9% of the time it's a person, that person or group of people will no longer be in your life, but it won't be because you've pushed them away. It's because organically they disappear. The next door neighbor is gone. The person who sat next to you in your office that you couldn't stand has been transferred to some other office. Or maybe all of a sudden you leave that job and take on another one. In other words, there will be no force or effort on your part, but they will be gone. Number two, the next thing will happen when you change your mind. This is all an internal process, is that person may still be in your life, but mysteriously, they stop doing whatever it was they were doing before. This is the part where people are, and I remember the first time this happened for me, I was dumbfounded. I just couldn't believe that this happens this way.
Yeah.
Or a person may engage in the same behavior, but somehow it just doesn't bother you anymore because you're now viewing them through a different lens, through a different matrix. You're viewing them now not through your own guilt that you're projecting onto them. You just can't believe how much you're in charge of the quality of your own life. You are not a victim of anything. It's all self-ordained.
Such an important message. And I 1000% have experienced this in my life in multiple different ways, through relationships, through work experience. And one of my, beliefs that I saw manifested in a lot of ways was other people taking me for granted. And when I looked at that closer, I realized how much I was taking myself for granted.
Absolutely.
And so,
You, the words will fit every time. It's like whatever it is you blame the other people for, you're doing to yourself.
yeah,
And there is no crime committed here, because remember, all of these things that we learned, it's kind of like this first 3 years when we don't have a left brain is kind of like providing this fertile soil, so to speak. I love gardening. I have a big yard and I have made a maintenance nightmare for myself because I have so many things planted everywhere. So in any event, but it's like in this nice, rich field of mulch, I grow beautiful flowers. I also grow weeds and ugly stuff that's in the way. Well, so out of my early 3 years when I had no left brain to be monitoring anything, to go, no, that's not true. In other words, I'm just learning, I'm picking up everything. And so as I grow these concepts about myself, they're growing out of this early mulch, so to speak. How can I possibly know that they're not true since they grow out of my earliest experience?
yeah, that
And
makes
And the only way we can address it is that they show up through the behavior primarily in relationships. And that way I can discover that what I'm bringing forward with me every day is I'm unworthy. I'm not deserving. I can't do anything right. Um, I, I, I'm inferior. I'm deficient. I'll never be able to make it. So these are just ideas that have not one shred of truth about ourselves, not one.
how important is it for us to stop judging everyone and everything?
Well, it's crucially important that we stop judging, because remember, what we judge, the reason we judge is to decide what will I accept and what will I reject. I mean, after all, what is the point of dividing things into an acceptable and unacceptable pile, whether it's people or situations or words or feelings or anything else, except that I've got to get rid of some of them because I've decided that some of them are in my way. They don't have anything to do with me. They're just like something that appears. So to judge something and to push against it and to resist it and to make it try to go away never works. It backfires. Whatever I push against, I will always have more of. Would you like to know why?
Yeah.
Because to judge something and to resist it and push against it requires that I put my full attention on it. But guess what? The way the universe actually works is whatever I put my attention on, I have more of. You go, oh no, you mean when I'm trying to get rid of, when I'm trying to resist this, that I'm really actually making it bigger and more present? Yes. Attention is life-giving. attention is like a prayer. So if you're giving attention to what you don't want, it's exactly like you're down on your knees praying, please give me more of this. And that prayer, because of the you are the creative power of the universe, is always answered. So keep that in mind. It's like if you've decided that something isn't okay for whatever reason, and you really resist it or hate it, judge it, push against it, find it unacceptable, whatever, be wary, because what you're doing is guaranteed, not just randomly, maybe or maybe not, you're guaranteed to have more of that in your life.
What are some practices or tools that you would recommend to really start cultivating a different shift in the way that we're seeing ourselves in relationship?
Well, since my primary metaphysical wisdom teaching, so to speak, is A Course in Miracles, I would advise doing the lessons. The lessons, there's 365 lessons. They are not for learning anything. And you go, a course, it seems like you're supposed to learn something with a course. It's like, yes, well, it's too bad it was named that, but it was. They were, after all, college professors. And besides, the name was dictated to. They said, could we call this something else? And the answer was no. It's like,
Of
okay,
course it is.
well, there, that's what it will be. But it's literally not for learning. So this is why people, I can't understand what this says. It's, you're not supposed to be able to understand it. If you could understand it, you wouldn't need to do this. It, in my early career, after teaching advanced math in high school, my actual degree is in mathematics. I was a systems engineer with IBM. I know a whole lot about programming and debugging programs and everything related to taking out programming that's giving you results you don't want and putting in the correct programming. This is literally what those lessons do. It is putting in new programming in your own brain so that you're building new neural networks when you're contemplating that material. And so the text is when you decide to learn something, but we're not going to learn our way into peace of mind. We're going to release our guilt into peace of mind. We're going to change our minds about ourselves and our worth and our value and what we bring to the table. That's the path to peace of mind. Now, in my early days, and they started very early, before I went to school, I thought something's not right here, something is missing. And so I was on the quest for what is it that's missing by the time I was 5 years old. And so all through my growing up years and college years, and I don't know, for 25 years, I read more books than is in a library someplace. I thought I was missing information. I had no clue until much later on that no, I wasn't. I had way, way more information than I needed, a lot of it contradictory. I needed the experience that comes from finding these places things that I believed that were false, and letting them go. And it's a steady, ongoing process. You don't just do it in a weekend.
Yeah. How fascinating is it that you studied, computer programming and are really able to apply that to brain function, which it is. I mean, our brains are like computers and we really are programming in constantly what we want our brains to act upon. And so I do think it is so important to cultivate a daily practice because
Absolutely. And it's not only a daily practice, it's the building you might say the muscle memory. You know how people build muscles in your arms and legs and breathing muscles and so on. This is the habitual building the muscle memory of right now at this moment, I'm beloved, I'm safe, it's a brand new moment. My gosh, I've made a million mistakes, but they're not here anymore. I'm being supported in every way possible by, we'll just call it the universe. We don't have to, it's like love itself is here for us, guiding us, giving us messages. It's like, it's not like we're wandering around in the desert trying to do this by ourselves. We've got the support of all that is to help us. And if we can trust this, what we don't trust, let's rephrase that, we don't trust our own lives. We don't trust the presence that is ourselves. We think there's something suspect about us that comes with this early unfortunate programming, but there isn't. So it's like I have within me uh, intuition, guidance, um, uh, wisdom, grace, everything in the world is already present. This is not something I'm going to get in the future. This is something that's built into the fabric of our being right now. And all we're asked to do is pay attention to you. You are a powerful, loving presence extension of all that is. It's not like you've got just some little tiny light bulb of power to work with. You've got all that is to work with, but nobody ever taught us trust your intuition. It's going to lead you in an unerring way to the next thing you need to look at, the next thing to release, the next way to give your presence, the next way you can be helpful to somebody else. So when that's your goal, I'm here to be truly helpful. Help me know what that looks like. And your life will unfold in a startling way. But remember, it's trustworthy. You can trust that if you get the sense of, I don't know why, but I think I need to call this person, or I need to stop doing this and start doing that. It's like, it's time for this marriage to be over. It's like, trust that this is leading you. When you get to be a senior citizen, as I am, and I have spent a lot of time following my intuition, and some of it has led to very painful experiences. And at the time you go, what? And then you go, thank God this happened. Without this, I would never have uncovered this particular, whatever it is I'm doing to myself. It's like life is gloriously here for us, but we've been walking around with blinders, not able to see it, but it's not been diminished. Help hasn't just gone, okay, what? You're not going to listen to me after 5,000 messages to you? Okay, I'm leaving. It's like it doesn't work that way. Like,
Right. And there's something you mentioned before we started recording that I think is such a powerful and important message. And that is that if you're doing the work and you're noticing miraculous shifts in your life, and yet you still have these experiences that bring up a great amount of pain or discomfort, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, those experiences are.
oh, no, it's not only not a bad thing, it's an essential, precious, thank God this happened thing. Now, nobody's going to thank God it happened when you're in the middle of grieving, or you're in the middle of feeling neglected or deserted, you know, all of these things that are being brought up. But as you resolve the guilt and the pain and everything that's involved with this, and you feel, because what will happen every time is you'll feel bigger and freer and more you and more capable and safer. And it's not like you go through difficult experiences and everything's the same. It's like you go through difficult experiences and I love living. And of course, I'm as long as I'm living, I'll still have things to go through, I presume, but I don't worry about that. I've been through enough, and I've been so glad I've been through enough that it's like, well, in a case like this, what is there to be afraid of? Nothing.
Mm.
And it's
Carol.
wonderful to be in a place where you go, so If my ego mind doesn't like something, good, let it not like something. I will continue to be fully present with whatever's going on. In other words, you stop the this is okay with me and this is not okay with me separation, so to speak. It's like, oh, I forgot that anything that's in my experience at this very moment is a full expression of what's going on with me at this moment. Remember, your outer world is a mirror only. It's an effect level only. And it's like an MRI of your soul, so to speak. So that this gives you valuable information. If there's stuff out here that seems limiting or that you don't like or seems like an attack, it's like, great. It's giving you all kinds of valuable information. And all change must begin internally. That's not like a moral thing. It's go please stand in front of your bathroom mirror with, in this case, I have on a navy blue shirt. I'm going to have a navy blue shirt reflected. And no matter how hard I instruct this reflection in the mirror to have on a pink dress, it's never going to work. There's no way that I can somehow make the reflection be different by trying to make the reflection be different.
Yeah.
And the great news is it happens moment by moment by moment. Notice if you walk and look in front of your bathroom mirror, you don't have to say, listen, bathroom mirror, I'm going to be coming in there in a minute with my navy blue shirt on, so kind of get ready for this. It's like, you don't need to get ready for anything. It's like life is continually showing up as an exact mirror of your exact state of mind. And so guess what happens? As more and more and more you think, I'm crazy about being me. Have I made a million mistakes? Oh, way more than a million mistakes. But life is good. I'm here to be helpful. No matter what, I can find something or someone to be helpful to. And you don't have to worry at all about what your outer life is going to be like. It's going to mysteriously improve, get better, get easier. All of a sudden, money will be there, and it's like, well, how did that happen? You don't have to worry about this doesn't mean you won't take action in the world, but the action you take is going to be directed from internally rather than I've got to fix my outside world because I don't like it. Give that up. You can't do it. It's impossible.
Carol, I'm loving this conversation. It has been so expansive talking with you. I have just a couple more questions for you, but tell listeners where they can go to connect with you and all of your amazing teachings.
We want you to come to my website. I have a filming partner because we've produced online courses, which aren't just sitting in front of Zoom like this. I do gazillions of blogs and things that way, but we have professionally produced films. And our signature series is See How Life Works. Because notice how clever the universe is. I married a man named Bob Howe, so I end up with my initials being C period Howe. So I can say, see how life works with see how. It's like, this is the universe taking care of the smallest of details.
I
So
love it.
if you go to our website, we're featuring this right now. We've got others that are filmed and we'll continue to make those available. But for those listening to Emily's wonderful work, use a coupon. Go to carolhowe.com. This can't be too hard to find. CarolHowe.com. There's lots of free resources, but our wonderful program, See How Life Works, we're going to offer to you with a coupon code, Emily. If you use Emily, EMILY, as the coupon code when you go to our courses, then you'll be very glad you did.
Amazing. We will link to all of that in our show notes. Carol, thank you so much. Last question for you. How can we start to cultivate more miracles on a daily basis?
Well, miracles are just what happens, and how nice and supportive and everything is when I change my perception. In other words, what we call miraculous is like the automatic result of my changing my mind and approaching everything and everyone in a more open-hearted and loving way. And
Love
it's
it.
automatic. So it's not like it's a magic trick. It's the automatic result of my finally loving and honoring and being ever so kind to myself. And I do that by realizing there's more than we can get into right now, but do that by realizing I am more than just a body personality called Carol Howe. In other words, that kind of shows up as my name tag, so to speak. But when we begin to realize we are the experience of everything.
Mm.
And so I want to treat everything and everyone and every situation with the kindness and the courtesy and the concern and the regard, all of it equally, because it's all equally ourselves. We are the conscious awareness that includes everything. So when we talk about supporting myself, it's not the body personality we're talking about. We're talking about myself. S, capital S, is everything.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.